Hey yo, I am the star in any room that I stand in. I am the standout, you just my stand-in. These bitches copy my homework, that's what they hand in. That's why I'm private like the airports I land in. Life is a beach house, don't let the sand in. I ball in any arena, go let the fans in.
So I think that black women have the absolute right, and to be truthful, the unfortunate responsibility to always mistrust people who look like me, who look similar. And that is because as bridges, you're also privy to the conversations being had in other spaces. And those conversations can be inherently racist. They can be featurist, colorist. And even if you don't align or subscribe to those messagings, you can subconsciously become sponges to them. I can also say for myself, I notice how comfortable people are saying things that are outright wrong and racist and prejudiced about black women to me. I've had an example of that on the podcast with that guest Sincere, where he made that comment and it just rolled off of his tongue as if it was not my mom and my aunts and me and my daughter and like big, huge, important, impactful, sacred parts of me that they were also slandering. And yeah, because you are a bridge, some people don't feel empowered to speak up in those places because they acknowledge that it's a privilege for them to even be a part of those conversations. So there's a fear of othering yourself in those times. And it takes a lot of bravery and maturity to get to a place where you can do that. And some people don't feel like they can afford that. For that reason, I have to not only expect to be constantly critiqued and scrutinized and assessed whether I am safe, whether I am an actual ally, and I have to welcome it because I have to acknowledge that there are parts of me that anybody who expects her to is really just coming from a place of jealousy. And that's a word that we often hear in the black community in regards to people who are ambiguous and people who are non-ambiguous. And that's the wrong word. I don't think it has a damn thing to do with jealousy. I think it has to do with trust. People want to know if they can trust me. People want to know if I have their back or if I have them in mind. And when people are calling that into question, analyzing.
What's up, y'all? I hope all is well. So in this video, I want to do some commentary in response to Shan Body's take that you all just heard, that I originally heard in a TikTok posted by Biracial Lounge. So shout out to them. They're on Instagram as well. So definitely take a look at their page. Some interesting stuff over there. So I wanted to do some commentary in response to what Shan said because I thought it was very interesting to say the least, and it definitely touches on the concepts of skin tone politics, gender dynamics, and just women of African descent interacting with each other that I touch on in this channel. So I wanted to do some commentary on Shan's perspective of why she feels as though monoracial black women have a right to mistreat or not trust racially ambiguous people. So that's my perception of what Shan said, but I want to break down her take sentence by sentence. But before that, let me just preface that I am speaking from the perspective of somebody who has a light-skinned black phenotype. So the type of phenotype I have, I'll put some examples on the screen. The type of phenotype I have, essentially, like, I can go either way. I could be monoracial, quote unquote, in the American context of monoracial. Whatever that means. I could be monoracial with two black parents. I could be biracial. I could be what I am, which is MGM or Afro-Latina. You know what I mean? Like, my phenotype could go either way, but generally I'm seen of having a light-skinned black phenotype. That's just my perspective. And I'm giving that prefix because I do feel like that I could have possibly a different perspective on the matter than somebody like Shan Body, who I believe kind of falls in the more racially ambiguous range. And if you want to know my perspective on the differences and similarities between the racially ambiguous and light-skinned black phenotype, experience difference. I have done a live on that, and I've kind of touched on it here and there in certain videos, but I would definitely recommend checking out that live to really be able to understand my perspective on that, and why I feel like there is kind of a difference in interpretation of experiences, or they might have a different perspective on stuff rather than somebody who has more of a light-skinned black phenotype. I'm just going to be honest with you. I feel like people who are racially ambiguous are a lot less direct with black people as light-skinned black people can be. And I'm saying that in the sense, or people who have a light-skinned black phenotype, even biracial people who have a light-skinned black phenotype, I feel like we're a lot more direct and a lot more comfortable saying stuff, or saying things that might be seen as outside of the box or quote unquote extreme. I don't find anything I say to be extreme, but whatever. I feel like we are more likely to say like quote unquote wild stuff or be more direct, as well. I feel like honestly a lot of racially ambiguous people tend to like tiptoe or like pitter patter around, or like they try to stay in black people's like good graces more, and I understand why. I definitely get why, but I just wanted to give that nuance, because I definitely think that that's kind of what I took from her perspective on that a lot, because I've definitely noticed that not only in my real life but on social media as well. So I think that plays a role in it, and also based on how you may have been perceived and interpreted moving throughout the world in society, as a kid to an adult, different experiences you might have had, different treatment from different people, whether it be negative or positive, different friendships and stuff like that, different comments you got. I do think that makes a difference, and although there are a lot of similarities between the like racially ambiguous or light-skinned phenotype experience, and we can relate on certain things, and relate on the quote unquote like light skin or mixed experience, I also do think there's differences and there are nuances in that as well. And that's one of the reasons why I did start this channel also, because that was another thing that I feel like was never spoken about, how like I feel like all like light skin and mixed and ambiguous people are all thrown into the same like box and experience or mindset or things like that, and I feel like that couldn't be further from the truth. So I just want to give that preference right there, but definitely check out my racially ambiguous experience live stream, where I really break down my take on that whole thing, and that'll help you better understand where I'm coming from with that intro. So let me quote Shan directly. And so Shan says that she believes that black women have the right to mistrust mixed race or ambiguous women. She said not only the right, but the responsibility to mistreat them. I feel like that was very interesting and definitely a bold take. And not only bold, but just weird in general. And it just reminds me of the like kind of, what do they call it, like when you're gonna be in a sorority, hazing. It just reminds me of like the trauma hazing that goes on in the black community, where it's like, oh, you have it's kind of like plays off this concept of this idea of like the pyramid of harm. So if the narrative is that light-skinned people have the most privilege and they're doing the most harm and they're doing all these things by simply existing, then because of the pyramid of harm, that places light-skinned people at the top, or ambiguous people at the top. And I know people are gonna say, oh well, she's not talking about light-skinned people, she's talking about ambiguous mixed people. Be fucking for real. Y'all know exactly who she's talking about, especially when people say quote unquote ambiguous. Y'all know exactly who she's talking about. She's not talking about her. Okay, she's not talking about the singer Her. She's not talking about Lori Harvey. We know exactly who she's talking about. So if I slip up and say light skin, I don't want to see y'all in the comment section splitting hairs. But anyway, so yeah, so I feel like that's a weird take. Sorry, I got distracted by those messages. But yeah, it just reminds me of this really weird perspective within the black community that I really don't like. That's like this idea that people should be able to like punch up at people, or talk shit or be ignorant towards certain groups of people, but maybe like non-black people or black people that look a certain way, even brown skin and dark skin people that are just like have more money or are financially well off or have quote unquote privilege or whatever. it's even justified to talk shit about them, but then they're hypersensitive and don't want anybody to talk about them, and nobody can say anything or correct or give a suggestion or speak on or say anything about them, but they're supposed to be able to say whatever they want and talk to and treat other people however way they want to. Like, I just don't like that. Like, I do understand the whole concept of, I get, like, I'm not saying it's anything, I get the whole like punching down, punching up thing. Like, I don't really care that much. I'm not a prude. But at the same time, I just noticed that this logic is used very often within the culture. And I think it's really childish. And I guess now, because like I'm at the receiving end of it, it's mostly annoying to me. But it's like, that's just not how the world works. It's a very childish way to look at the world. Like, okay, I'll use a neutral example of like maybe like East Asians or something. Like, you'll have black people who feel like, oh, I could make prejudice jokes or say ignorant shit about East Asians because in their logic they have quote unquote more privilege than them. And it's just like, or like, oh, because I'm black and y'all are anti-black, I can say what I want about you. And it's like, it's a like you can dish it type but not take it type of thing. And so that's kind of going to be a concept I speak on a lot in this video. So her logic as to why monoracial black women have a right to mistreat mixed women and ambiguous women is because this is her logic. So this is the first thing that I disagree with about her mentality, and explains to me why she has this like internalized guilt. So, I'm not biracial, so I can't tell biracial people how to feel about something or what to do. I thought that Shan Body was MGM actually. I probably should have looked it up before I started this video. But anyway, when I often hear like monoracial black people or even white people saying like, oh, biracial kids specifically, but they'll say mixed kids, but they're really talking about biracial people specifically, not MGMs who haven't had a white person in our family for 150 years or maybe 100 and maybe 100 years, but still. You know what I mean? But yeah, so like ain't nothing being bridged since 1885, like please. But anyway, so they have this delusional idea where they'll be like, oh, mixed kids are a bridge between black and white, which this idea is kind of starting to be outdated. I don't really hear people having this mentality anymore. You kind of heard this a lot in like the colorblind, I don't see race type of mentality of like the 80s through the early 2000s. A lot of us that were born at that time were kind of programmed to think this way. So, it kind of goes into like color blindness. But I don't think that it's fair to put the responsibility of bridging racial issues on mixed children. First of all, there's no responsibility on people of color at all to bridge anything. It's the responsibility of white people to apologize and fix the damage that they have done. Black people and other various people of color, mixed people, whatever, don't have a responsibility to bridge shit between white people. So that's just another way for white people to try to pretend like the disrespect and the destruction has been equal, and it has not been. So it's not mixed people's responsibility to bridge shit between black and white people. If white people want to bridge something between them and people of color that they've destroyed because of how they treated people, that's on them. You don't put it on the mixed child and try to say, oh, you're a bridge. No. And like, bro, that used to irk the hell out of me when I was younger, and I used to hear people say that about biracial kids. You see how it's taking me off right here. Like, I hate that mentality. And then you have the delusional black person who's saying that at the same time. Why would you put the responsibility on not only a child, but a person in general to be a quote unquote bridge between two groups of people that have a violent and racist history? Like, that's just, it's a lot of pressure there, and it's silly. And then you have to be extremely naive and childish to think that white people having sex with you does anything for race relations, and that it bridges anything. It just simply does not. And that's something that they can feed to black people to get them to think that, and certain mixed people will believe that. But white people know that them having sex with people of color has never meant anything in terms of race relations. So for them trying to push this whole bridging a gap nonsense it's just that pure nonsense. And so that completely connects to what I'm saying about Shan Body's mentality, where I feel like she's been conditioned and taught to think that it's her responsibility as a mixed woman to quote unquote bridge some type of gap or be the understanding between black and white people. And that's simply not your responsibility, sis. It's not. And honestly, your parents should have bridged the gap between each other and gotten all that together before you was born, and not put that responsibility on you, because that's not ambiguous and mixed people's responsibility to bridge nothing between them. We're just here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that just irritates me. And so I feel like y'all putting all this responsibility on these biracial people to fix these race relations when that's not their problem. In fact, a lot of them are victims of bad decisions that they monoracial parents made a lot of the time. Yet y'all don't ever acknowledge that, but then y'all want to turn around and say that they have privilege, but y'all don't acknowledge all of the ways that y'all's issues impact your kids and mess them up for and have them, you know, needing years of therapy for trauma, stuff like that, and there's no resources in the society for mixed people. It's ridiculous. That's why I hate the privilege conversation. It's very manipulative. Like, the whole privilege conversation is the same thing to me as the whole bridging the gap conversation, putting all this undue responsibility on mixed race people. That's just my rant. Sorry. So Shan's logic is that because mixed people may be in the presence of non-black people who are having ignorant conversations, as if monoracial black people can't possibly find themselves in a conversation with a non-black person making an ignorant statement. But okay, I guess her logic is that you might be raised around non-black people as a child and you might soak that mentality in, and then you take that into the rest of your life and have that mentality. And I understand what she's saying, but that can come from anybody. Anybody can grow up around ignoramuses who are colorist, racist, whatever, and then internalize those feelings as a child and feel that way. But it's your responsibility as an adult to unlearn that. That being said, that doesn't give other adults or other children the right to mistreat you or exclude you or act funny towards you because you may or may not possibly have been raised up around these conversations that may or may not speculatively have been had. Like, I hate when they make all of these cut and dry like answers regarding hypothetical situations. Like, anybody can find themselves in a conversation with an ignoramus. Like, you know, anybody can have been raised with an ignorant grandparent or a prejudiced aunt or uncle, or their parent was ignorant or was unexposed to other groups of people. You know what I mean? So should we all start just being ignorant and mistreating people or not trusting each other? That makes the cycle of racism and prejudice just go on. And I know I sound preachy right now, but it's like, that's not a reason to not trust or mistreat somebody because they may or may not have heard stuff from their non-black or, you know, whatever relatives or friends or whatever. Like, that's a prejudice and a stereotype right there too. And then how do you know that just because that mixed child or non-black person or whatever heard those things growing up that they internalized and agreed with that? They might have heard that and been like, dang, I know that they're talking about my people, or I know they're talking about, you know, other people who are my friends, and I don't agree with that shit. You know, just because somebody hears something does not mean they're automatically going to be a sponge and soak that up. And you shouldn't assume that people are going to do that either, or are going to think that way based on how they look. How is that any different than, you know, other forms of stereotyping and prejudice, assuming that somebody thinks some way or feels a way about a topic just because of how they look? It's stereotyping. So it's not okay. So Shan's logic is basically saying, oh, well, because we may be stereotyped a certain way, they have a right to not trust us until we prove ourselves otherwise. And this goes back to what I'm saying. It's not mixed people's job to pander to monoracial people's feelings and insecurities to show, oh, I'm a safe person. I'm gonna, you know, lower my feelings and not say how I feel or not be honest about stuff or act like I'm not a victim, you know, to make you feel comfortable, or I'm gonna downplay my, you know, whatever about myself to make you feel comfortable. Like, that's not how the world works. That's not a fair ask of mixed people. And then just because we look a certain way and we may or may not be accepted in certain spaces or have been around certain people, that does not mean that we have any systematic social or economic privilege on our side. Mixed people are really out here on our own by ourselves. So like I said before, we don't have any resources for the mental health or the you know, the internal or social or home issues that we may have to deal with. We don't have those structures or political advocates in place. Especially not in the United States. So what are y'all talking about when y'all saying, oh, you monoracial black women have a right to mistreat ambiguous people because we might be in conversations? Yeah, and if a hate crime happens and you get hate crimed against because you're mixed, they don't even have any documentation or anybody who's going to advocate for you or defend you in that regard, unless you say, oh, you got a hate crime because you're black. You know what I mean? You don't even have that advocacy, but you sitting up here justifying people mistreating you. This is how silly a lot of mixed and light-skinned people be sounding on here. And y'all think probably, oh, I be going so hard at the light-skinned saviors. This is why, because you're spewing nonsense and then you get held up by propagandists. I forget what the word and propaganda that they use, but basically, it's called the beautiful people tactic, where basically, let's say they're persecuting a group of people. I'm not saying we literally are being persecuted, but you get my drift. let's say they're persecuting butterflies, right? And then they're being mad discriminatory the bees are being mad discriminatory towards butterflies, and then they find a butterfly that says, oh, I'm not being mistreated against at all. I actually like living in this segregated part of the garden, and I don't mind, I don't mind bees treating me like shit until I pander to them, and then they give me some pollen. I don't mind doing all that. It's fine for me. I'm comfortable. Then the bees will say, oh, well, this butterfly is acknowledging their privilege. This butterfly is acknowledging that they're not being treated bad. So what's wrong with you? You're just complaining because all of these other butterflies are not complaining. So what's wrong with you? That's why I have an issue with light skin saviors. And so now we really getting into the meat and potatoes, and that was a great segue and connection bridge. See a theme here. That is a great way to bridge the connection between my last commentary and what she just said in this clip, because even before I looked up the interview that Shan was referring to in this part of the response, I already knew she was talking about something a black man said. I already knew it. And this is something I often hear a lot that people will do within colorism conversations. They will speak very generally about situations or about hypothetical colorism scenarios that could or may not happen, but they never mention who the colorism actually is coming from. They never mention the skin tone of the person who made the comment. They never mention the participants of the conversation in question that Shan was talking about earlier, that people should judge light-skinned people based off of. They never give specific groups of people to these scenarios. They always just speak about them in very like specific. They always speak about them in very specific scenarios, but they never specify who they're talking about, the colorism is actually coming from. But then they always bring the conversation back around to why light-skinned people need to feel guilty, and it's why how it's light-skinned women's fault specifically. And I always find that interesting, and it also irritates me, and it's a very manipulative way to talk about colorism, because the whole point of colorism and what makes it different than racism and just prejudice is that colorism is intraracial. So one of the reasons why specifically people of African descent always speak about colorism in this very vague, non-connected way, and they if you really listen, they try to phrase it and they try to make it seem like they're talking about white people being colorist, and they're trying to make it seem like white people favor light-skinned people. If you really listen, they always try to make it seem like they're talking about white people, because if you listen to the beginning of her commentary, she says, oh, mixed people, we might be a part of these conversations where prejudice things are being said. I interpreted it as that she was talking about non-black people, but then she shifts it to talking about a conversation she was having with a black man, which that actually would be colorism. If a bunch of non-black people are, and I know she didn't say she was specifically talking about colorism, but it seems to me like she understands that she's a mixed woman. She sees herself as a woman of African descent. So it seems to me as she's talking about colorism and not talking about racism. So if non-black people are sitting around talking shit about black women, no matter their skin tone, they're just being racist straight up. It's not colorism. So you can't combine those two scenarios and say, oh, black women have a right to mistreat us because all these different groups might be talking about us. A group of white people or non-black people not talking shit about black women and a mixed person is there is very different than a black man talking shit about black women and a mixed person is there. It's a very different dynamic, very different intentionality in the conversation, and not to mention, literally 9 times out of 10, if a non-black person is prejudiced against dark-skinned black people and they're quote-unquote colorist, then they have an issue and they don't like, and they're racist towards mixed people also. So I don't understand why y'all making it seem like mixed and light-skinned people are just so accepted by racist and prejudiced non-black people. That's not the case. So even with the whole light-skinned privilege conversation is stupid. Somebody tolerating you, somebody hiring you to play a role or in a company so they could check off their diversity, equity, and inclusion tax, even though they don't really want you there anyway, is not an example of privilege. It's an example of somebody tolerating you and trying to meet a quota. Like, it's not personal. It's just like it's a very like crabs in a bear bucket type of thing. So it's like it's the point where people think that being tolerated is something that you need to be like feel special about, or you need to like, you know, apologize or allow other black people to mistreat you over. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it was never that deep. But anyway, so I noticed that she was kind of trying to like make it seem like, I don't know, she just wasn't being specific about who she was talking about. And then she said, oh, even when I had that conversation with Sincere. And it's like, wait, so what conversations are you talking about, Shan? Are you talking about conversations between non-black people? Or are you talking about colorist conversations that happen amongst people of African descent? Because there's definitely a difference. But anyway, they'll talk about non-black people first to skate accountability away from black males, because they know 9 times out of 10, the main people who are having these quote unquote colorist conversations and elevating mixed and light skinned women over brown skin and dark skin monoracial women are always the men. But they don't want to indict black men in the conversation because black men are perpetual victims within the black community. And then the whole point of why Alice Walker came up with the concept of colorism, because she was a black feminist, even though the conversation has been co-opted by pick-me's, male identified women, and covert mean girls. The original conversation started off with created by feminists, and it was not popular. The same women who are talking about colorism today would never have been talking about colorism in the 80s when Alice Walker was talking about it, but I digress. The whole reason why black feminists were the first promoters of colorism is because black feminists understood the intersectionalities of black women's gendered experience in the black community. That's why so many black people had an issue with the movie The Color Purple, because it depicted black men in their eyes as a quote unquote, in a quote, negative light. When in my opinion, I think it was extremely accurate to how they acted at that time, and it's accurate to how they act now too. So because it was too revealing of black men's true behavior and it showed black men as the problem, that's why black people didn't like that film when it first came out. And that's also why they're always trying to hide the colorism conversation behind non-black people and light-skinned women, when in reality, we're really talking about ignorant black men's mentality 9 times out of 10. So if we take, after I took it all the way around the mulberry bush and after we do all of that, break down all of those layers, then we get to the root of the conversation, which is that what Shan is really saying is that black women have a right to mistreat mixed women because of the way that black men elevate mixed and light-skinned women over monoracial brown skin and dark skin women. That's really the root of. And again, bringing it back halfway around the mulberry bush, this is my issue with these light-skinned savior ass chicks, because they're taking accountability and allowing themselves to be the scapegoat of a dynamic of triangulation that black males are creating, an environment of mistreating or valuing black women based on skin tone or heritage. They're facilitating that environment. But yet somehow it's mixed and light-skinned people's responsibility to take accountability for that and get mistreated for it. You're fucking bugging. You're bugging. I will never do that. And some of y'all are so thirsty for validation or to feel like you have one up on another black woman that you will take that role just to feel that way. And I'm not talking about that for Shan, because I actually don't get that vibe from Shan at all. And I actually know that she's with a mixed man herself. I don't get the vibe that Shan is like that type of light skin savior where she has internalized guilt because she dates brown skin and dark skin men. So I want to be clear about that. But there's a type of woman that's definitely like that. And you'll notice they're always low-key defending these males. And then they try to pretend like they don't care about men. But then they'll try to shit on women like Alice Walker and me. Low-key be defending these men all the damn time. Or low-key be always shielding them from responsibility and putting the attention back on black women or other mixed women like Shan is doing. And that's the problem. I'm just sick of the black male fucking worship. That's really what it is. But again, another tangent. And then she's over here like, it was so comfortable for him to say that in front of me. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock, because black women and women of African descent in general have facilitated an environment where these men know that they can say whatever the hell they want to say about black women, can be extremely disrespectful, can triangulate us against each other, can uphold the same values that y'all said that the slave masters instilled. They can do all of this, be talking hella shit, have their quote unquote preferences that are really rooted in ignorance and self-hate, and y'all will pretend and pump fake like you don't notice what's going on, but then you want to turn around and beef and talk shit to other women. It just doesn't make any sense, and I'm just sick of it. Like, and then you got these chicks that want to take accountability for what the men are doing, and it's just annoying to me. It's like, speak for yourself. I'm not taking accountability or feeling guilty about some shit that black men are saying. When they not getting the same treatment. So it's like, it was so comfortable for him to say that because he knows women like you, Shan Body, who know better, you're going to take the fall for them, and you're going to take accountability for this dusty dynamic, and you're going to allow yourself to be the punching bag and to be ostracized and mistreated and scapegoated, while these men get to enjoy the fruits of your labor by enjoying having access to multiple women, creating a bunch of broken homes, running around triangulating everybody against each other, pitching and catching to other men, you know, doing all types of just wreaking havoc throughout the entire black community. But they sitting up here talking about light-skinned women though. Like, I'm sorry, since when were light-skinned women running around creating single parent homes at a rate of 76%? Like, I'll wait. Like, I'm so over it. And it's like, when, and I've said this before, when the minute your community creates so many social issues, you are in no position to ever say anything to mixed and light-skinned women. And I stand on that, period. You have nothing to say to mixed and light-skinned women when the men in your community are running amok throughout the whole society, costing the government billions of dollars. Shout out to Cynthia G. And one of the reasons why I'm getting super passionate about this is because I've literally heard women say stuff like what Shan Body is saying, and saying, oh, well, I don't really trust light-skinned girls because I feel like they're not good friends, or I feel like they're going to be full of themselves, or I feel like they're going to want all the attention, da-da-da-da. Basically, stereotyping light-skinned women a certain way, saying that they don't want to be friends with them or can't trust them. And so I have an issue with that. Like, you think I don't want fucking friends? The hell? Like, the hell? You don't think I want to be, you know what I mean? You don't think I want social connection? You think I want to run around living my life indulged in stereotypes? Who wants that? So I'm not saying, you know, doing these videos or pushing back on what she's saying because I'm trying to gaslight, or because I don't want colorism acknowledged or addressed, or that I don't think light skin and mixed people should ever take accountability for anything. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm not going to facilitate an environment where people are allowing people to you know, mistreat or have this automatic prejudice or mistrust towards me. Like I said, when the men in your community are causing so many issues, I'm sorry, there's no reason to mistrust mixed and light-skinned women when black men make it very clear every single day how they genuinely and truly feel about women in general, like how misogynistic they are and how they don't feel like black women are valuable, or even, you know, are very dehumanizing towards black women. And black women just completely ignore that, won't even acknowledge it, won't even like give real consequences to what's going on. Just now, a lot of women are starting to acknowledge it slowly but surely, but even then, a lot of women would still get triggered hearing the shit that I'm saying. You know what I mean? And I feel like this whole light skin versus dark skin, skin tone politics conversation is another way to divert the attention away from what the men are doing. Because at the end of the day, if black men were not making the type of content, media, comments, or triangulating, or, you know, even with their actions, only, you know, girlfriending up because they ain't marrying nobody, but only baby momming or girlfriending up, you know, certain types of women, you know, always praising a certain look of black women, they music or whatever. If they wasn't doing that, black women would not be sitting around judging each other or sizing each other up based on skin tone and hair texture and shit. And anybody who pretends like that's not the case is lying. The only reason women are having these conversations is because men put that shit in the ethos, period. Like, so when Shan's Booty saying, oh, well, black women have a right to mistrust me, you know, because of the way I look, you're basically saying that other women have a right to mistrust you because of ideas men put in their head. But mind you, they don't mistrust the man. They don't mistrust the men that have been showing with their physical actions for hundreds of years that they don't give a rat's ass about black women. They don't mistrust them, but they have a right to mistrust you because of some shit a misogynistic man put in their head. How does that even sound right? Like, the math ain't mathing with that logic at all to me. So I can kind of end this part of the commentary on a semi-positive note. I actually really agree that the word jealousy and the association with jealousy as it regards to like mixed race people and monoracial people in the black community, I agree with her that I do think that that word is overused. And I actually agree, as somebody who makes skin tone politics content, that wording makes me uncomfortable as well. And if you notice, I don't use that wording on my channel often. There have been very few times when I've called something jealousy or talked about jealousy, because I completely agree with Shan. I actually don't think that is jealousy a lot of the time. I think sometimes sometimes, yeah, things can be jealousy, but a lot of women can be jealous of a lot of different things, and skin tone is probably way low on the list a lot of times. I think that black women's perception of their skin tone and their self-esteem, I think it's a stereotype that black women are just so self-hating and hate themselves so much, and then like it's so common for women to be like in their mid 20s and 30s and stuff having skin tone issues and hating how they look. I don't believe most black women are like that. I feel like it's complex. I think all women of all races have insecurities or have had self-image issues. I think that when it comes to black women, that conversation is completely blown out of proportion, and it's a stereotype. Like, it's a stereotype that black women are insecure about their skin tone, their hair, and stuff like that. And so that's why I don't like perpetuating the jealousy stereotype either, because I feel like it's a lazy form of analytical thinking to assume that, oh, just because somebody's saying something, that, oh, they're jealous of me because I'm light skinned. Shit, they could be jealous of you because you live in a big house. They could be jealous of you because you got on some new shoes. They could be jealous of you because they want your job. They could be jealous of you because they like your shirt and it sold out before they bought it. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many reasons somebody could be jealous, but yet black people never talk about it in that way. Like, I never hear black people talk about somebody being jealous of somebody's house or somebody's level of education or somebody's level of professionality. Like, you never hear it talked about in that way, especially when it comes to black women. But the minute it's a light-skinned woman and a dark-skinned or brown-skinned woman beefing or going back and forth or something, there are some people who will automatically say that the brown-skinned woman is jealous. And a lot of times it's other brown skin and dark skin people saying that the woman is jealous. It's not even light skinned women saying that. Sometimes there will be light skinned women who will say, oh, she's jealous of me. Sometimes, but it's like when you just trying to clap back at a bitch, you're gonna say whatever. But a lot of times I see a lot of brown skin, dark skin women like perpetuating that onto each other, and I don't think that that's healthy either. And so that's why I personally, just like Shan said, I think it's more complex than jealousy, and that's not me justifying, but I do think that it's more complex. And I've kind of touched on this also on my channel, because what I really think it stems from is like the same reason why I'm constantly pushing back on these skin tone politics stereotypes. If you're being essentially brainwashed, or when you're conditioned, and I feel like the conditioning can go both ways, in the sense that I feel like brown skin and dark skin people are conditioned to believe a lot of lightest stereotypes, and light skinned people and mixed people are conditioned to internalize those stereotypes, and how that person deals with that internalization or deals with that self-image kind of may dictate how they interact in the world or how they view themselves, their skin tone, etc. But anyway, if you're conditioning the entire community to think in this lightest way about mixed and light-skinned people, then yeah, and you're constantly telling them, oh yeah, during slavery they was in the house. Oh yeah, they're always the ones to get chosen. They're the quote unquote preference. Oh yeah, back in the day, chicks would be jumping them because they were light-skinned. They were jealous. You know what I mean? If you're constantly hearing those messages your entire life, then it's natural to grow a form of resentment towards that group of people, because if you're being told that they're living better than you, or that they're having it easier than you, and your whole image in society, because of the black community who wants to keep black women in a certain place, and they're constantly putting on you that you're jealous and you're this struggle girl and you're this ride or die and yada yada yada, naturally you're going to grow resentful towards this other group of women, even if they're in your group also. So it's like, it's very insidious what the black community is doing, because they're really intentionally triangulating light skin and dark skin and brown skin women against each other. But then they turn around and say, oh no, it's society doing it. Society's pitting black women against each other. Society treats light-skinned women better, when really it's them, and they can really solve their own issue. And then they put the responsibility on light-skinned people to solve, when light-skinned people really don't have the social power or even the organization skills to do that. Like, individual light-skinned people can only be responsible for ourselves. You know what I mean? There's no light-skinned committee to tell all the light-skinned people how to act. You know what I mean? Like, but we're not in films in the same, we're just not, you know what I mean? We're not collectively putting out the same stereotypes that other groups of black people are putting out about us. It just is what it is. So yeah, I feel like that's not fair to put out these stereotypes where you're always portraying the light-skinned girl as the love interest, or as, the snobby light-skinned rich chick, and then y'all want to say, oh, why are brown skin and dark skinned women jealous? Oh, why y'all think that they're better? Why y'all, you know what I mean? Like, it's just annoying. So they know exactly what they're doing. So I actually agree with Shan Body about that part. And that's also why I go out of my way to push back on these stereotypes about light skinned and mixed women, because I do believe that it causes other women to harbor a lot of resentment towards us. It causes other black women not to empathize with us. It causes other black women to not identify with us, or to not see us as not even allies, because we don't need to be allies, because we got a lot of the same issues. So why I gotta be allies with somebody who I got the same issues with? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like it just causes a lot of unnecessary issues, when, let's be real here, 90% of this comes from desirability politics, coming from men's dick perspective. That's just, it is what it is. So that's my take on Shan's perspective of why black women have a right to mistrust and, in my opinion, mistreat mixed and light skinned women. That was my interpretation of her commentary. But y'all get in the comment section, let me know what y'all thought about Shan's perspective as well as my perspective on the topic. Thanks for all the support. Peace.